Felicia McGuire was 32 years old when she vanished on October 7, 2007, devastating her family and friends. Witnesses last saw her alive in the Boston neighborhood of Dorchester. The police carried out massive searches and thorough investigations. Still, she was never located. She vanished in mysterious circumstances, and the police received information of a person of interest engaging in questionable activity. But soon, the investigation was closed, providing no closure for Felicia's loved ones. The Boston, Massachusetts neighborhood of Dorchester is situated in the city's southern region. It is Boston's largest neighborhood, with a total land area of almost 6 square miles. Over 90,000 people from various ethnic backgrounds live in Dorchester, including Irish Americans, African Americans, Caribbean Americans, and Vietnamese Americans. Dorchester is now a rapidly developing neighborhood in Boston as a result of recent residential and commercial construction. This case we are looking at today takes place in this area. Felicia McGuire was born in 1975 in the lovely city of Dorchester. Although her father's identity is unknown, she was raised by her mother, Sharon McGuire. Felicia spent her formative years in a joyful household filled with love and laughter. She gave birth to her only son in 1997 and named him Nicholas Fahey. After the birth of her son, Nicholas became the core of her entire universe. It wasn't clear who Nicholas's father was, and what had happened to him, however, remained a mystery. Felicia never left Dorchester. She continued to reside there with her cherished son and her mother, building a home that was warm and loving, regardless of the obstacles and difficulties life hurled at her. Over the years, Felicia got into a relationship with a man by the name of David Pena. She also shared a home with him. Despite the difficulties of being a single parent, Felicia never wavered in her commitment to her child's welfare. She put forth endless effort to make sure her child had the finest life possible. She went above and beyond to provide her child the attention and assistance he needed. Felicia McGuire was a great example of a selfless and devoted mother who prioritized the needs of her child before her own. She never let life's challenges break her spirit. Unfortunately, all her efforts to see her child excel and become a great person in the society came to a stop when on October 7, 2007, Felicia McGuire disappeared without a trace. The 32-year-old devoted mother was last seen in Boston, Massachusetts' Dorchester area, where she lived. Nobody is aware of what happened to her after being seen going about her business on Rixton Street. Sharon, Felicia's mother, was devastated by the disappearance of her daughter, and the confusion surrounding Felicia's whereabouts only made matters worse. She looked through every telephone directory and potential contact she could think of, but her effort yielded no result. Felicia's failure to get in touch with her friends and family as the days passed by caused them to worry more and more. After 10 days, on October 18, 2007, Sharon McGuire finally reported her daughter missing. The Boston Police Department immediately got to work and opened an investigation into her disappearance. They soon found out that Felicia's behavior was not normal and that she had ceased speaking with her beloved son and other family members. This raised concerns that she may have been the victim of a terrible incident. Since it was not in her character to vanish without informing anyone, Felicia's family was very concerned for her safety and well-being. They wondered where she could be and what had happened to her. Her son and family had to deal with the lingering doubts about her fate. As the investigation progressed, law enforcement personnel put in a lot of effort to find any information that would help them solve the mystery. In an effort to piece together a timeline of Felicia's final known movements, detectives questioned members of her family, acquaintances, and neighbors. A thorough search of the neighborhood, including neighboring woodlands and bodies of water, was also carried out, in an effort to find the missing woman. Felicia's family got more worried as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. They never stopped wondering where their cherished mother and daughter was. The Boston Police Department was concerned about her disappearance as well. Because of the lack of information, they posted pictures of Felicia McGuire on social media in November 2013, in an effort to get any information that would help bring her home safely. They gave a thorough description of her in the social media posts. The police voiced great concern for her safety and well-being and listed her physical characteristics, including her height, weight, hair, and eye color. Felicia was a stunning woman with chestnut brown hair and piercing, life-filled eyes. She was a slim 5 feet 2 inches tall, weighed around 140 pounds, and had a medium frame. Felicia had been missing for more than 6 hard years, and as each day went by, the mystery surrounding her absence grew more complex. Despite investing a significant amount of time and resources in the search for leads, her body had never been located. However, following the Facebook post in 2013, Several witnesses' report of Felicia's disappearance remained suspicious. An unnamed witness, who reportedly lived below Felicia McGuire and David Pina's flat in 2007, told the police that he remembers Pina, Felicia's live-in boyfriend, showing up at his door in the early hours of October 7, 2007, asking for a ride to his mother's house in Devon Street. The neighbor noticed blood on his clothes, but at the time, Pina had claimed that Felicia had stabbed him with scissors. However, the blood on Pina's shirt suggested something much more heinous had happened. The witness claimed that Pina informed him that during their fight, he had pushed Felicia against the wall with force, striking her head on the bed or dresser as a result. Pina then said he didn't know if she was still alive and seemed unconcerned about her fate. The witness continued to make observations of Pina. He claimed Pina's right hand was also swollen. When questioned why, Pina stated that Felicia had hit him with a baseball bat. Days later, 2 additional witnesses asserted that they had seen Pina return to the apartment on the same evening. According to them, around 3 or 4 in the morning that day, Pina returned home with another man and went upstairs. After some time had passed, they returned, dragging a blanket that may have contained Felicia McGuire's body down the stairs. The 2 witnesses attempted to assist but were turned away and told to mind their own business. To add to the mystery, another witness claimed that in 2007, after lending Pina his 2005 Chevy Impala in exchange for narcotics, he received it back with a shattered and freshly cleaned back seat. As the investigation went on, these troubling details led the police to suspect David Pina and raise doubts about what actually happened to Felicia McGuire. Without delay, investigators questioned David Pina about the case. They also discovered that he had a violent past with Felicia. Pina told investigators he was Felicia McGuire's live-in boyfriend at the time of her disappearance, and their relationship was anything but easy. Since Pina had previously told the first witness who had called the police that he and Felicia had engaged in a violent altercation at their apartment, the police questioned him about it. He then admitted that Felicia attacked him with a pair of scissors, stabbing him in the shoulder. Pina reacted by leaving the apartment and seeking safety at his mother's house. But when he came back a few days later, he made an unexpected discovery. Felicia had left, and her belongings had been taken. After the interview, investigators were forced to release Pina because there was no evidence against him, and he made no incriminating statements. Following this, the investigation into Felicia's death was a torturous journey full of detours that eventually led to every possible dead end. Although every lead was pursued and every piece of evidence was examined, the case grew colder with each passing day. Felicia's family and friends were in excruciating pain and desperately wanted explanations for her disappearance. For years, rumors and conjecture have been circulating regarding the whereabouts of Felicia McGuire, the adored mother who disappeared in 2007 without a trace. In 2017, when the FBI conducted a search in a heavily forested area of West Roxbury, fresh hope was generated. Days of investigation were conducted in secrecy, with no information provided to the press, leaving the public to speculate as to what had brought the authorities to that location. The truth came out in the end. The investigation into Felicia's disappearance was in fact related to the search, and it was an essential step in the drawn-out process of learning the truth. The search turned up a witness who told the detectives the shocking information that David Pina had requested his assistance in removing items from his apartment in 2007, including a heavy rolled-up carpet. He added that Pina and his accomplice had placed Felicia's body in the trunk of a car before speeding off. The witness who saw this claimed that he instantly had the suspicion that a body was wrapped in the carpet and blanket. Sadly, he was right in his assumptions. Finally, with the aid of the witness, Pina was able to carry Felicia's body into a wooded area with a parking lot where they dumped Felicia's body. The investigators were almost close to solving the case, but they needed to find the location where Felicia's body was dumped. However, the solution to this seemed to be a mystery that would never be solved despite numerous leads and witnesses. Before learning what happened to her remains, the witness left the scene. It was even made worse by the fact that the witness had no knowledge of Boston and was unable to offer any suggestions as to where the body might have been dumped. The prosecutor was unable to offer closure to McGuire's family and loved ones because they had been given a frustratingly incomplete picture of the crime. A few years later, on January 14, 2023, David Pina was successfully arrested by the Boston Police Department's fugitive unit at the Florida's Baker County Detention Center. Pina was wanted for a murder charge related to Felicia's case from Dorchester District Court, and he also had an outstanding warrant from Suffolk Superior Court for trafficking cocaine. Felicia left her young son behind when she disappeared from Roxton Street in Dorchester more than 15 years ago. Her family and friends who have been looking for her for so long may finally get some answers thanks to Pina's arrest. On February 15, 2023, Pina showed up in court for his arraignment on the charges leveled against him. After more than 15 years of uncertainty and heartache, the case has attracted national attention, and this most recent development has revived hopes of discovering Felicia's remains. The family of Felicia McGuire now has some sliver of hope. Despite the fact that her body was never discovered, police have reason to believe that her remains are still somewhere in the Boston region. An investigation that had remained cold for a while has now received some resolution following the news of an arrest. Felicia's family and friends can now rest easy, knowing that someone will be held accountable for her tragic disappearance, even though it couldn't bring back their beloved Felicia. We hope that justice will eventually be carried out. Pina will likely stand trial very soon and is scheduled to appear in court. Our thoughts and prayers are with Felicia's family and friends at this trying time. As they continue to recover from this unimaginable tragedy, we can only hope that they will find some solace and peace. What do you think about this case? Please leave your comments in the comment section below. On February 27, 2011, a murder occurred in the village of Hyannis, which is found on Cape Cod, Massachusetts' southern coast. Todd Lampley, who was 31 years old, was fatally shot through his bedroom window. It took 12 years to uncover the truth behind Todd's murder, despite some shocking evidence that was discovered at the crime scene. Hyannis is a charming city that is tucked away on Cape Cod, Massachusetts' southern coast. This charming gem is full of history, natural beauty, and endless things to do. The serene waters of the Nantucket Sound surround the village, offering breathtaking sunset views and numerous opportunities for water sport enthusiasts. Hyannis's charming main street is lined with vibrant shops, art galleries, and eateries serving delectable regional seafood. For those who love history, the 35th President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, loved to spend his summers in Hyannis, and his life is chronicled in the John F. Kennedy Hyannis Museum. In addition to its cultural attractions, Hyannis is home to immaculate beaches that provide a tranquil retreat from the stress of daily life. Today, our case takes us to this city. On February 27, 2011, Hyannis, Massachusetts, was calm and peaceful, with a light breeze sweeping through the streets. However, nobody realized that the tranquility of the area was about to be shattered by a heinous crime. Todd Lampley, a young father and adored member of the neighborhood, was about to pass away suddenly. As the evening wrapped up that fateful day, a worried neighbor went to see how Todd was doing. He became aware of an issue as he got closer to Todd's house. He noticed that Todd's door had been locked from the inside. The neighbor became suspicious and immediately contacted the police. The detectives showed up at the address Todd's neighbor had given them. Their anticipation and fear sent their hearts racing. Nothing could have prepared them for what they saw. They could only imagine the worst-case scenario. When they arrived, they discovered a horrific scene. Todd Lampley, a 31-year-old man, had been shot dead through his window and was found lifeless on the floor of his bedroom. The crime scene was covered in blood. It was a horrifying scene. Hyannis residents as a whole were in disbelief. How could such a thing occur in their tranquil neighborhood? The investigation that followed Todd's murder uncovered secrets, lies, and shocking revelations that left everyone in disbelief. The investigators' shock turned to curiosity as they examined the crime scene. When they started to assemble the evidence, 3 shell casings and a black cell phone were discovered at the crime scene. It was clear that Todd had been ruthlessly shot from outside his window. The investigators were left perplexed, and with a never-ending stream of inquiries. In an effort to find any clues that might help them identify the murderer, they thoroughly searched the area surrounding Todd's home. No lead went unexplored, and no stone went unturned. The detectives were aware that maximum attention to details is needed when it comes to cracking the case. To find anyone who may have heard or seen anything unusual on the night of the murder, detectives went from door to door and interviewed every local resident. As people told their stories, they paid close attention in order to piece together a timeline of events that would aid them in solving the case. However, when the detectives stumbled upon an odd object at the crime scene, Todd Lampley's murder case took an odd turn. Investigators discovered a sweet potato which appeared to have been used to muffle the gunshots. This sweet potato acted as a silencer. It appeared as though the murderer had been influenced by the popular HBO series, The Wire. Season 1 of The Wire features a tragic scene in which a woman is mercilessly shot and killed in her own home by a shooter who is hiding outside her window in the night. Before firing a fatal shot, the killer taps on the glass to draw her in. This terrifying scene is eerily similar to Todd Lampley's real-life murder in Hyannis, Massachusetts, where he was also shot through his bedroom window. However, this is not the only way in which the HBO series affected the murder. According to reports, in Season 4 of the same show, one of the fictitious police detectives solves a murder in which the perpetrator shot his victim to death using a potato as a makeshift silencer. The similarities between Todd Lampley's tragedy and the Wire world are unsettling and menacing. A demonstration of how honestly the show depicts life on the streets, where a similar trick was employed to conceal a gunshot. To muffle the sound of the shots that killed Todd Lampley, the perpetrator used a potato with a hole cut out in the center and placed it over a gun's barrel. Also, the cell phone that was discovered at the shooting scene was registered under the name of one of the show's characters, Marlo Stanfield, which heightens the intrigue of the case. To put it mildly, the relationship between the show and the crime scene was confusing. DNA evidence was found on the sweet potato after investigators sent it for testing. Even then, it would take years for investigators to connect this DNA to a specific individual. Investigators soon had another trail to follow. It was discovered that a handgun believed to have been used in the murder had been dumped into a nearby lake. Later, it was recovered by police after being fished out by citizens. Fortunately, detectives now had another lead in their inquiry. As part of his probation in a separate case, DeVaris Hampton, a man with a troubled past and a lengthy criminal record, was wearing a GPS monitoring bracelet at the time of the murder. Hampton was precisely where the gun was thrown into the lake according to location data from his GPS monitoring bracelet. Phone records showed that Hampton and a man who was at Todd Lampley's house at the time of the murder had exchanged phone calls and text messages many times. However, the strongest connection is yet to be uncovered. Detectives found evidence of a prior relationship between the victim, Todd Lampley, and the suspect, DeVaris Hampton. Hampton once claimed in court that Todd Lampley was responsible for the same area murder of Jacques Sellers in July 2007. It's interesting to note that Jacques was also fatally shot through the window. It appears as though Hampton was leaving a trail of clues for detectives to follow. It was only a matter of time before justice was done, because all the evidence pointed to him. Hampton had created a web of lies and deceit around himself, but it was beginning to fall apart. In 2011, after being detained in an unrelated case just a few days after Todd Lampley's murder, Hampton remained silent and declined to answer any questions regarding the Todd Lampley case when questioned. Although it was a frustrating obstacle, the investigators persisted. They were committed to solving the mystery no matter what. Years of diligent work were finally rewarded in 2016 when DNA evidence linked Hampton to the murder. Hampton had spit some of his phlegm into a puddle, and authorities collected some of it and used it to obtain a DNA swap without Hampton's knowledge. The results were conclusive when they were returned. The sweet potato's DNA matched Hampton's spit's DNA. It was a turning point in the investigation. The pieces were starting to fit together, but even with this damning evidence, it took until February 24th, 2023, to capture DeVaris Hampton. For the fatal shooting of 31-year-old Todd Lampley, 40-year-old DeVaris Hampton was apprehended and charged with 1 count each of murder and assault and battery with a dangerous weapon. When asked why Hampton's arrest was delayed for an extra 7 years, authorities chose not to address the reason for the delay in the tense and uncertain courtroom. In Barnstable District Court, Hampton made his initial court appearance on February 27, 2023, exactly 12 years after the fatal shooting. He pleaded not guilty to the charges against him, firmly declaring his innocence with a serious expression on his face. Despite the seriousness of the situation, DeVaris Hampton maintained his composure and resolve, knowing that he faced a protracted and difficult legal battle. As the judge scheduled his next court appearance for April 5, 2023, the courtroom fell silent. The investigation into Todd Lampley's murder may have reached a conclusion and a suspect has been named, but it's far from over. Russell Enos, an assistant district attorney, has been coy about the delay in the case, saying only that the evidence has been evaluated. Edward Fogarty, Hampton's court-appointed attorney, has pledged to mount a resolute defense and expressed faith in his client's innocence.
In 1999, 17-year-old J.B. Beasley and Tracy Hollett were best friends. They were incoming seniors at Northview High School in Dothan, Alabama. The girls who lived in Dothan, Alabama, had decided to travel to Headland for JB's birthday celebration on the 31st of July, 1999. They loaded up in JB's 1993 black Mazda at around 10 p.m. and headed out. However, they soon got lost in Ozark, which is roughly 20 miles from their house. At around 10:30 p.m., the girls halted at a gas station to ask for directions because they couldn't decide where to go. They also used the gas station's payphone and appeared to have a better understanding of where they needed to go after speaking to some friends. However, an hour later, they were still in the dark and far from where the birthday celebration was to take place. They made another stop, this time at a different store that had a payphone. Tracy then called her mother, Carol Roberts, and explained that they were lost. She soon added that they were returning home. Sadly, Carol never saw her daughter or her best friend ever again. The next morning at about 5 a.m., Carol noticed her daughter hadn't returned home. She knew something was wrong because Tracy was never late. When it was 8 o'clock and Tracy had not yet returned, Carol called the Dothan Police Department to report her missing. Authorities got to work and discovered JB's car that day. It had been parked on Herring Avenue in Ozark, with the tank empty, despite it being filled the previous day. The car's driver's side window was rolled down a few inches, and the doors were unlocked. A handprint on top of the trunk gave investigators an eerie clue as to what might have happened. The police opened the trunk and discovered JB and Tracy in it. They both had been killed by a gun. Although dressed, both teenagers were strangely dirty. Semen was discovered on the scene, which allowed detectives to obtain a DNA sample from the offender. Because both girls still had their purses and valuables, authorities were able to rule out robbery as a possible motive. The only item missing from the car was JB's keychain, which held the car keys. It was unclear to investigators if JB and Tracy were killed in the trunk or somewhere else. On September 1st, 1999, a month after the girls were discovered, a man named Johnny William Barentine walked into the Ozark Police Department to give his testimony of what he thought might have happened to the girls. According to him, on the 31st of July, 1999, he had gone to the grocery store to purchase milk for his 2-year-old son, just about the same time Tracy contacted her mother from the Big Little store. On his way back home, his car got hit by a black truck with Dothan license plates close to Herring Avenue. He claimed to have seen the truck speed away from the crime scene where the girls were discovered. The investigators interviewed Johnny for 4 hours, and during those times he changed his testimony at least 5 times. Johnny at a point placed himself at the crime scene. After much inconsistencies in his testimony, the police eventually filed 2 murder charges against him. Johnny was sentenced to death. However, he kept on asserting his innocence and said he had just made up the stories to get the reward money. In the year 2000, the grand jury decided not to indict Johnny. Upon discovering that his DNA did not match the semen sample discovered at the crime scene, he was no longer treated as a suspect. Over the years, a number of additional leads turned out to be false, but the detectives never gave up looking for a DNA match. The authorities have looked into a lot of suspects throughout the years. They conducted hundreds of interviews and collected DNA samples from quite a number of people, but there was no luck. On the 20th anniversary of the girls, investigators reopened the case and decided to use a new approach. They entered the evidence at the crime scene to a public genealogy database in March 2019 and soon got a connection. Officials soon announced the arrest of 45 years old Coley Lewis McCraney. McCraney, who had been in Dothan all along, was charged with 5 counts of capital murder and 1 count of first-degree rape. The community and Marlos Walker, the current chief of the Ozark Police Department, were astonished by how the investigation turned out. Chief Walker actually attended school with McCraney. They found it hard to believe that he could be accountable for such a heinous deed. Back in 1999, McCraney would have been 25 years old, divorced from his first wife, and was involved in an ongoing paternity lawsuit. Ironically, the day before the killings, the judge had actually mandated that he submit a DNA test. Records show that he never followed the directive. McCraney had never been arrested before, and he was never considered a suspect during the initial investigation in 1999. He got remarried in 2001, and at the time of his arrest, he was a bishop, motivational speaker, and working for the Lord. After his trial in April 2023, Coley McCraney, who is now 49 years old, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. On April 15, 1997, a father and his two sons discovered a body in a secluded, dry stream bed close to the Morgan County line off Eagle Rock Road in Union Grove, Alabama. The skull, hands, and feet of the deceased individual had been removed on purpose, probably to hide his identity. Investigators suspect the man's heart and spleen may have contained evidence because they were also removed. According to forensic analysis, sharp-edge trauma was the cause of death. The gruesome efforts by the victim's killer or killers appeared to work because for years, investigators were unable to identify the victim. However, in 2019, Alabama authorities partnered with a DNA technology company named Parabon Nanolabs, which gradually made progress in the investigation by first enhancing and clarifying the DNA samples from the body and then comparing those profiles with others in genetic databases. Scientists from this company were able to create a genetic profile of the victim after overcoming DNA deterioration and bacterial contamination that had occurred over the course of the previous 26 years. They used DNA phenotyping to determine the physical characteristics of the victim. They later produced a composite sketch of the victim's profile, which revealed a male whose age was between 20 and 28 years old. He was of North European descent, with a light or pale skin. He had blue eyes, brownish blonde hair, and few freckles. The investigators at the time released these sketches to the public in the hopes to get information, but no lead came out of it. In order to identify the victim, scientists at Parabon Nanolabs entered the body's DNA profile into public genealogical databases. Although they were able to pinpoint a few distant relatives of the body's DNA from the databases at their disposal, it took months to finally identify the victim. After finding further relatives and matching that information with historical records, the scientists were able to name the victim as 20 years old Jeffrey Douglas Kimsey of Santa Barbara. In 2023, investigators were able to track down a member of the Kimsey family in Tennessee, who then directed them to Kimsey's parents in Santa Barbara, California, where the identity was verified. Jeffrey Douglas's parents claimed they didn't know he was dead. He was never reported missing either. It isn't clear what he was doing in Alabama at the time of his murder, but investigators believed he was probably just passing by. Since Jeffrey Douglas Kimsey's case was ruled as a homicide, detectives are still on the case, trying to find his killer. They, however, announced having persons of interest in the case and are actively pursuing every lead and utilizing evidence gathered at the scene where the body was discovered. Hopefully Jeffrey Douglas Kimsey gets justice soon. On a cold morning on November 15, 2015, around 11:30 a.m., Hale and his wife, who lived on Farley Lane in Lillian, Alabama, discovered a startling sight on their private driveway. They noticed a strange car that had been there the first time they came out around 7:30 a.m. On seeing the car again, they had a bad feeling about it and decided to check it out. When they peered into the car's windows, they saw the body of a young man who appeared to have been shot to death at the back of the seat. Hale immediately dialed 911, and the Baldwin County Sheriff's Office arrived at the scene and identified the individual as 22 years old Devin Deshaun Kennedy from Pensacola, Florida. His mother, Tammy Sims, had reported him missing a day before. Further investigations revealed that Devin had a history of run-ins with law enforcement in relation to drug charges. When Tammy Sims got the news of her son's murder, she was devastated. In an interview, she described Devin Kennedy as a determined young man who sought a better life for himself and his family. He was also a devoted father and a loving son. According to Sims, her son always wanted to run his own business. He always mentioned starting a restaurant and investing in real estate. Sadly, Devin's dream was cut short and his life taken away from his 2-year-old daughter. Devin was working and attending college the day he was killed. His mother knew something was wrong when he didn't come home or answer his phone calls. Tammy Sims sought justice for her son for many years, pleading with the public to put themselves in her shoes and say something if they knew anything. Sadly, the case was opened, but gradually became cold. Police also investigated the case at the time and identified a few people of interest, but they did not have any solid evidence to link them directly and charge them with the crime. For 8 years, Devin Deshawn Kennedy's case file stayed cold on the Baldwin County Sheriff's shelves. In April 2023, the Baldwin County Sheriff's Office announced the arrest of 32 years old Deputy Darnell Herring, who has been charged with the murder of Devin Deshawn Kennedy. According to the police, they earlier received information that eventually led to the arrest of Deputy Herring. They, however, never mentioned what information it was. According to detectives, Devin and Herring may have known one another, and the motive for murder was robbery. Herring had shot Devin elsewhere and left him off at Lillian, Alabama. Deputy Herring's first court appearance took place Friday afternoon on the 21st of April 2023. He informed the judge that he had been imprisoned for the past 7 years in Florida due to a felony firearms charge. He had just served the remainder of that prison sentence when Baldwin County detectives named him as their top suspect in Devin Kennedy's murder case. After his bond hearing that Friday, Judge Bill Scully set the bond amount at $150,000. Deputy Herring would be required to wear a GPS ankle monitor and be prohibited from leaving the state as part of the terms of his release if he were to successfully post bond. This case takes us to Heflin, Alabama. In 2002, Heflin was a small town which has a population of less than 3,500 people and a total area of just 16.31 square miles. Back then, everyone pretty much knew everyone, and when a triple homicide occurred in a place like Heflin, it shook the very core of the community and left behind aftershocks that may still be felt today, particularly when the victims were a young pregnant woman and her 6-year-old son. Monica Pritchett Rollins was a 23-year-old mother of 2 boys named Dalton and Aaron, who were 6 years old and 2 years old respectively. Before her murder, Monica was also expecting the birth of her 3rd son in a few weeks. After she and Jeremy Rollins, Dalton and Aaron's father and her high school lover, made the decision to separate and file for divorce, Monica and the boys moved into their Sugar Hill Road home in late 2001. On Friday, September 13, 2002, Donald Pritchett, Monica's father, had been looking forward to Monica and the boys' arrival at his Anniston house, so he could finally give Dalton his gift, a colt Dalton had named Mojave. When they finally arrived, they spent the evening talking, eating, and riding horses before Monica and the boys returned to their Heflin house at around 8:30 p.m. with the intention of returning later that weekend. But after the weekend had passed with no further communication from Monica, a family member made the decision to go see if everything was well with her and the kids. Nothing could have prepared them for what they discovered when they arrived at Monica's mobile home around 10:45 a.m. on September 16, 2002. Monica and her first son, Dalton, had been cruelly killed in their own house. According to autopsy results, they died as a result of multiple stab wounds they sustained somewhere over the weekend. Because of the assault, Monica went into labor. Her unborn child was later discovered dead and only partially delivered. Aaron, her 2-year-old son, was discovered hidden in a closet inside the house alive and unhurt. Around 6 p.m. on the same day, Jeremy Rollins left Southwire after completing a 12-hour shift. He found out about the killings of his ex-wife and his oldest son a few hours later when the police requested him to report to the station. As the investigation progressed, officials claimed that Jeremy was not a potential suspect and that he cooperated with the inquiry the entire time. The detectives did all they could to find the culprit at the time, but there were no tangible leads. At the time of the murder, DNA, fingerprints, and other types of evidence had been gathered at the crime scene and transferred to the Alabama Department of Forensic Science for examination. Unfortunately, due to budgetary restrictions, the forensic department experienced severe backlog problems at the time of the killings, which caused a delay in processing. The case, however, went cold for decades until January 2021 when investigators reopened the case. They re-interviewed 60 people and resubmitted a cigarette butt found at the crime scene to the forensic lab for DNA testing. After a thorough analysis, investigators linked the evidence at the crime scene to Louis Landon Spivey. Spivey, who is now 36 years old, was 18 when he allegedly killed Monica and Dalton. He was romantically involved with Monica. After the murders, in 2010, Louis Spivey was imprisoned in Florida for 15 years due to a separate robbery and severe assault case from Bay County. investigators visited him in prison for an interview. On June 26, 2023, Louis Landon Spivey confessed to the killings of Monica Rollins and Dalton Rollins. He allegedly offered officials a complete confession by describing the incident and accepting sole responsibility for the killings. Finally, after 21 years, Louis Spivey was taken into custody by Helfand Police Department after his release from a Florida prison. The young son of a woman named Yvonne Johnson was playing behind their Brookhaven Trailer Park house on Hurst Street in Opelika, Alabama on the afternoon of January 28, 2012, when he discovered a small human skull. Startled, the little boy ran inside to inform his mother, who then dialed 911. In a short period of time, authorities reached the location and retrieved the skull. They then spread out into the woods and discovered more human remains. Also, a pink long-sleeved shirt with heart buttons and ruffles was found. This was discovered next to a brook, but it was unclear to the investigators whether it was associated with the human remains. Following forensic examination, it was discovered that the bones belonged to an African American girl between the ages of 4 and 7. In line with malnutrition, the results also showed that the young girl's bones were underdeveloped. She had an obvious abnormality to her left eye, which was presumably brought on by abuse, and there were indications that she had been physically assaulted before her death. The young girl suffered fractures to her ribs, shoulders, limbs, legs, and skull. She suffered more than 15 separate fractures from blunt force trauma in total. All these injuries had been incurred before she passed away. The girl's DNA was run through the missing person database, but no matches were found. The police soon appealed to the public for information. Unfortunately, there were very few tips, and after just 4 months, the case was closed. The unnamed youngster was later referred to as Opelika Jane Doe, or Juvenile Jane Doe. In an effort to get some urgently needed information, federal agents at the FBI office in Quantico, Virginia, used forensic imaging equipment to create a sketch of what the young girl may have looked like while still alive. The composite sketch was made public by the detectives. They had billboards up around the southeast and circulated the flyers widely online, urging anyone who may identify the young child to get in touch immediately. Investigators soon determined that Opelika Jane Doe had died between 2010 and 2012. However, after a former Vacation Bible School instructor at the Greater Peace Church in Opelika came across the sketch, she gave investigators a picture from 2011. She thought that Opelika Jane Doe was in the photos. They made public the church photos, which showed the young child with a defect in her left eye. She had black hair that was fashioned in little, tight curls and was medium in length. The general population was prompted to reflect on the past and to examine whether they knew a little girl who attended the Bible school. According to them, Opelika Jane Doe usually appeared to have been slightly unkempt and wearing filthy clothes. She was described by the teacher as being quiet, solitary, and not particularly social with the other kids at the Bible school. Authorities tried to find her name in churches and schools, but they found nothing. They soon transferred Opelika Jane Doe's remains to the University of South Florida's Forensic Anthropology for isotope analyses after the images were made public. She was identified as being from the southeastern region of the country, most likely Alabama or nearby states. With no lead, the case went cold for 10 years. In 2022, detectives expanded their search for answers outside Alabama. They went to other states where the girl might have lived before her murder. They questioned residents and interviewed quite a number of people, showing them Opelika Jane Doe's possible photos to see if they could identify her. Luckily, there was a significant breakthrough in the investigation when authorities discovered 50-year-old Lamar Vickerstaff Jr. to be Opelika Jane Doe's father. Lamar Vickerstaff was born and raised in Opelika, but throughout his time in the Navy, he resided in a number of locations. He finally settled at Naval Station Mayport in Jacksonville. When investigators met with him at the naval installation to break the news of his daughter's death, he steadfastly refused to identify his daughter. His wife, Ruth Vickerstaff, was questioned by investigators, and she admitted she had no idea who his daughter was or who she might have been. She and Vickerstaff had tied the knot in 2006. The detectives did further investigation and discovered Opelika Jane Doe's real mother, who was 37-year-old Sherry Wiggins. Sherry disclosed to the police that in January 2006, She had given birth to a girl who went by the name of Amore Jovia Wiggins. However, after her visitation privileges were revoked, her ex-husband Vickerstaff and his wife were granted physical and legal custody of her daughter in 2009. Sherry Wiggins was able to provide investigators evidence that she had been paying Vickerstaff child support since 2009. According to investigators who looked through pediatric and school records in the communities where the Vickerstaffs resided, Amore Wiggins was never enrolled in school and was never reported missing. In January 2023, DNA testing made it clear that Opelika Jane Doe was actually Amore Jova Wiggins. On January 17th, Vickerstaff Lamar and his wife Ruth were both taken into custody. Ruth was charged with failing to report a missing child, while Vickerstaff was charged with felony murder and failure to report a missing child. Finally, after 11 years, Amore Wiggins' identity was finally buried with her. On February 27, 2023, hundreds of residents of Opelika and investigators came to honor her life. Detective Alfred White of the Opelika Police Department remarked, "We can finally put the right name and right face to her, and we don't have to call her Jane Doe anymore." Sherry, Amore's mother, was also present. In her words, she heartbreakingly said to her late daughter, "I didn't want you to have it hard, so I let your tiny hand go, thinking you'd be playing in a big backyard.